The feeling was akin to climbing a mountain for 10 years. And then you get to the summit, and then you realize you climbed the wrong mountain the whole time. The apartment manager came in for the inspection and he just started like yelling at my mom. And then after he left, my mom just like broke down crying. And that was really the first time I felt real anger. Like, I'm a chill person. So I was like, what the heck? And I was just so pissed. I was like, okay, like, no more. I'm gonna have to do something about this.
Hey, Daniel, so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for flying all the way from San Francisco to Manila to do this podcast and be at the CloudTech conference.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Daniel, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Daniel. I'm the general partner at Goldhouse Ventures. And Goldhouse is a community that builds cultural leaders and leadership in the creative industries, entertainment sectors. And we're building just the largest membership of the top Asian leaders in every industry. And I specifically lead the venture capital team and investing in great companies like Clouded.
Yeah. So we got to start all the way from the beginning because, I was looking at your background and everything. And I kind of laughed about your educational history because you studied at UCSD, and then after that you studied at Northwestern twice.
Yes.
And so you had described it as, I'll let you describe it because it's funnier coming from you, but could you share what those three experiences were?
So I guess a little bit of family background.
Yeah.
My parents are immigrants from Korea. They left behind amazing careers, amazing jobs to immigrate to the US. And they started a small business out here. So I grew up in a small business family. That a story for another time, a lot of turbulence, but that experience gave me appreciation for entrepreneurship. But my parents went through a really hard time. So like as every Asian immigrant parents, they impressed upon me, hey, you gotta be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. It just so happened a lot of my family members, cousins and aunts, they wanted to be doctors. And so, okay, like that's what I'll do. I'm gonna go to UCSD, I'm gonna be a doctor. 2 quarters in, I realized very quickly I was not meant to be in the healthcare industry. But it's already a little too late, right? And so that moment was like, oh my gosh, like I spent my entire childhood and high school like optimizing to be a doctor, but now that I'm here, I don't want to do this. But it was around that time I started my first business in high school, and I thought, wow, this is super fun. And so we didn't have a business major at UCSD, so I decided just to go into economics as my major. And that was, I would say, my first like academic pivot. But I think it was all trial by error, right? Like I did not want to be a doctor. I didn't even bother checking out engineering. And I just eliminated those 2 career paths. So the only thing left is being a lawyer. So after UCSD, I graduated. I joined a consulting firm because around that time, both my younger brother and my mom went back to school. Well, my brother went to undergrad, and my mom did a career pivot and went to nursing school. And so while they're in school, I was in consulting, make sure they could graduate. And when they did, I was like, okay, it's my turn to go back to grad school. I was lucky enough to be accepted to Northwestern's JD-MBA program. And that's where I was like, okay, I'm going to make my parents proud. I'm going to be a lawyer, going to work at a law firm, and they could brag about me.
Yeah, and I think the way you described it was UCSD, you ruled out being a doctor. And then you went to Northwestern for law school, and you described it as making your parents happy.
Yes.
And then you did the business school side, and you said you made yourself happy.
For myself happy.
I love that so much.
I am such a great son.
I know. Let's screenshot that on LinkedIn and put it as an image here in the middle to see why it's so funny when I saw that. So what's interesting is that there are 3 prisms that resonate with me, and I think so many other Asian Americans. Would be one is there is the parental expectations about who you should grow up to be. That's one. 2 is the financial reality of the family. 100%. And 3rd, of course, is your own personal expectations about all interests that you want to do. So could you share a little bit more about why it happens so much?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, so my parents are immigrants from Korea. They started a small business here, and I just saw the turbulence of that. And so for them, it's like they came here, they don't really speak the language, and they're trying to start a company and a business. They have no safety net, like I mentioned before. And so they struggled a lot. Declared personal bankruptcy. They went through a lot of ups and downs. And my family actually grew up in poverty. And because of that, my parents were like, okay, like they were really impressing on us, hey, like, I don't want you guys to struggle like we have done.
Right.
And that generation is defined by struggle, sacrifice, and just finding stability and survival, right? That's their story. And they do that on behalf of the next generation. And so they see our success as justification and validation of that struggle.
Right.
And for them too, the entire immigration journey itself is entrepreneurial, right? They're giving up everything, taking a bet on themselves, coming to a foreign land, and dealing with so much uncertainty. And because of that, I think our generation, as a second gen in the US, I think we struggle in the sense of like we're split between identities and we feel almost a sense of guilt or debt towards the previous generation. And we feel that like, hey, I think going down this prescribed route of being a professional XYZ, white collar professional, being a doctor, lawyer, engineer is the best way to honor their sacrifice. And because of that, you tend to diminish your own dreams, your own passions. And you'll never hear an Asian immigrant parent tell you like, hey, go pursue your dreams, go be happy. Like maybe eventually, but you know, I think the first instinct is to say like, hey, we want you to be secure, to be financially stable. And basically the implication there is like, we don't want you to struggle like we did. We want you to be stable and financially secure first, and then you could be happy.
Right.
And so I think a lot of my generation now, we are entering a phase where like, hey, we did everything right, quote unquote. We went to grad school, we worked at the best companies, but we feel the sense of hollowness that maybe this is not the life that we wanted for ourselves now. We're here, but maybe our real passions and real dreams are being unfulfilled. So side note, I actually think that's why the Asian founders we backed are so exceptional. They all have the most amazing pedigrees, right? They come from Berkeley, Stanford, Harvard. They worked at the best tech companies, law firms, consulting companies. But now they're in the mid-20s, early 30s. They're like, hey, I've already done that, checked off all the boxes. Now I'm going to go pursue my dream.
Yeah, amazing. And I think, you know, one thing that comes up for me is that, you know, in America, like there's such a huge focus on academics because it feels like academics is the only fair system, you know, to climb the ladder. You know, but at least from a parent's perspective, you know,
it's an
like,
equalizer.
It's an equalizer, right? Because it's not a social network. It's not who you know or what you know. It's very much like, okay, you know, you got 99 of 100. You know, you get to go to the UC system,
exactly,
and then you get to college, and you know, whatever. And then college will, you know, so
right.
And I'm just kind of curious because you know, there you are, and you know, you went through the experience where. You went to consulting and you did, you know, 5 years there to support your family. I'm just kind of curious, what did you learn from, you know, that consulting stint?
Yeah, I think consulting was one of the most formative experiences I've had professionally. I think being in a big company really taught me how to like speak the language of the corporate world. It almost felt like training too. Like you kind of go to college and you kind of learn and it sets like a baseline. I thought consulting was very similar, how to think in a structured manner, how to be analytical. My clients were very senior military and government officials. So I'm like in my early 20s and Asians, we look so young too. So being in a room with like, you know, like a 2-star general or like working with someone from the Pentagon, it's intimidating.
Right.
And I'm also a introvert. So I think it really forced me to like, hey, like, do you belong in this room? It made me confront that question. And, you know, my upbringing as an Asian son, Asian immigrant, where we're being told like, hey, like just blend in, just conform, don't stand out, don't cause any friction. It kind of worked against me. But being in the consulting world where you're client facing and you have to present in a certain way, have a certain demeanor, and you have to engage. I think that one that's super intimidating, but really taught me the value of speaking up, being present. And it's really like the soft things that really, in my mind, in retrospect, that really mattered.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I resonate with that. I was also a management consultant, my formative, you know, post-undergraduate year. And I, you know, bought glasses.
Me too. I got glasses.
To look older.
The moment I stopped my consulting job, I got LASIK. I wear glasses to look smarter.
And older as well.
And older as well. Take it seriously.
It's a real problem for.
Sponsored by Warby Parker.
And so, you know, there you are, and you know, you went back to grad school, and obviously we're looking at the joint JD and MBA. And I think that makes a lot of sense, you know, for your career. I'm just kind of curious. There you are studying, and you made a decision to say not law but go into business. So I'm just kind of curious how you came to that realization. Yeah.
Yeah, that in itself was a journey too. So I applied to the JD-MBA program because when I was applying, I was like late 20s. Like, I'm not going to go back to school twice. I might as well just do it in one shot. Northwestern has a accelerated JD-MBA program. So that's what I applied to. And it was my dream program. It was so funny because I was also applying to like just regular MBA programs as well. And I got into a couple, but I think when I told my mom, she was just kind of lukewarm about it. She was like, oh, cool. Yeah, that's cool. That's a good school. But the moment I told her like, oh, I got into law school, she just screamed, right? She's like, oh, you're going to be a lawyer. And I remember thinking like, dang, I have to be a lawyer now.
Yeah.
I don't want to disappoint my parents.
Yeah.
So I went to Northwestern. I went to law school. And I think, what I learned in law school was that like I could probably do this. Law school is just a pure grinding.
Yeah.
I was in the library for like 12, 14 hours a day, just really like locked in. But I think just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean you derive joy from it. And I never, had this emotional invocation of like, oh, this is like what I'm meant to do, right? I think a lot of pressure came from seeing what everyone else wanted to do and just comparing yourself like, oh, they're going to work in this law firm or they got this clerkship. And it almost become like the ultimate rat race. It's like you're doing something you want to excel, not for yourself, but to keep up or just to race ahead. And I caught myself like just really like sad and depressed about it too. But like, you know what? I'm here. I got a ton of student debt. I got to make it worth it.
Yeah.
Then so over the summer, I worked at a law firm that was just notorious for being like a place where you just really grind. And I saw like the associates, they were so miserable, but I think it's because one is just the nature of the job. If you're working insane hours, billable hours. And I also saw the partners, right? And these are just amazing, incredible people. But what really stood out to me was like the partners who were just crushing it. They loved what they do, right? They had a passion for it. It's like law was their entire thing. Whereas a lot of the early associates I met, they're just kind of doing it, one, just to get the paycheck or because they don't know what else to do. They're all brilliant people, but I just saw the difference and the gap between doing something you love doing versus something you feel like you have to do. And that really just started like cascading in my head, like the questions of my purpose, like what's something I'm passionate about, what makes me feel alive. And at the end of the day, I was like, I think law is something I could do, but I don't think I could do it for the next 10 years. I don't think I would really be the best at it, right? And so I came back to school, and that's when my MBA classes started. And that was just so much more fun,
Yeah.
I would wake up, I'll go to school, go to classes, sit in the front, raise my hand, participate. It's just completely insufferable. And at Northwestern, there's a student entrepreneurship program. So they choose 10 of the top student entrepreneurs. I was lucky enough to get in. Me and a couple MBA friends, we decided to do business together. We got funding from that. And my year at the MBA, year and a half, all we did was just work on that company. And I remember this just came from just like the deepest parts of my heart, like, oh, this is so fun. Like, I just remember on Friday nights too, I lived in a like apartment that's just known for having all the MBA folks, and Northwestern MBA students are known for being party animals. I just remember like just on the weekends, like Friday nights, the unit next to me, they would throw like all these ragers, but I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so annoying because they're just like working on my company on like Friday night, like 2 a.m. But to me, that was like the most fun. And then I think that just kind of made me think again, like, is this what what do I really want to do? That summer, I was lucky enough to also intern at a private equity company. And, in my mind, I was like, this is like so insane. I reached the American dream because, coming from poverty, a family of immigrants, I'm working at 2 of my dream firms in like big law and private equity, working with these amazing people at these like big name. So yeah, I was there. I got a verbal offer and I was happy. I was just elated for like 10 minutes. Got back to my hotel room and I was like, wow, like it's gone, And I came back to school and I just got this like deep depression. I was like, why am I so sad?
Yeah.
And I think the feeling was akin to climbing a mountain for 10 years. Then you get to the summit.
Yeah.
And then you realize you climbed the wrong mountain the whole time. And I was like, wow, like I feel I just kind of grinded my entire 20s because I thought I wanted to be here. And the pursuit of prestige, money, title, stability, that wasn't my dream. That was my parents' dream for me. And when I checked that box, I realized like I feel so hollow and so empty. And so, yeah, that's my educational and academic journey. I think it really got me to a point where I regret none of it. But I think the education and striving so hard, what the gift it gave me was the gift of choice.
Right.
Because now I have all these options available to me.
Right.
Yeah. And so I don't regret it whatsoever, but it just really forced me to confront the question, what is my dream? What could I do for the next 10 years? If I died today, what would make me proud?
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, your parents had those expectations because that's what they had suffered through, and so and they loved you, and that's what they thought was best for you.
Yeah.
But that wasn't your reality about your dreams, right?
100%.
And so, how did you go from there to eventually venture capital investing? How does that happen? Because you start eliminating stuff, right? So like not a lawyer,
Being
not a
real
doctor.
honest here.
Maybe it's business, not private equity.
Yeah.
You did a startup a bit. I'm just kind of curious, how do you kind of like navigate your way there?
Yeah. So I came back to school and I was just like in this like dark place. And I just remember just really talking to a couple of mentors and just also just really looking back on my history. Like, what do I daydream about, right? If I just have blank space. I think daydream is a good signal about what is interesting to you. I looked at all the craziest moments of my life, which is one I did in my own startup. And I also did a lot of side businesses ever since I was like a kid. I'm the typical like deer lemonade stand. I did that unprompted when I was young. I did side businesses, e-commerce stores all throughout like high school, college, and after. And so I knew entrepreneurship and working with founders, and also seeing my family go through that is like, I think that to me is like, one, it makes no sense to be a founder. Entrepreneurship and venture makes no sense whatsoever on paper. There's other things that are more prestigious, that will make you more money on a risk-adjusted basis, much more stable. So I realized like being in venture, being a founder, working entrepreneurship, it's like a labor of love. Like you really have to love doing this, right? And so that's one of the things I realized, like I really want to work with founders. And I thought I'll just be a founder myself. But yeah, I remember coming back to school after my internships and I was just kind of like looking through on LinkedIn and I came across Goldhouse, right? Like they posted something, it was still very early. And I clicked on the Goldhouse link, it took me to a website. And I was just like reading to the website and the copywriting literally made me tear up. Like I never ever had a website made me tear up before. And so, but it touched upon everything I was feeling about, one, pursuing your dreams, empowering the community, working with founders, working with icons, and making sure our narratives and representation in mainstream media gives us the opportunities we really need. And so I read that and I was like, oh my gosh, like I really need to get involved. And that's like the first time I kind of just felt that hope and joy. And so I went back on LinkedIn, I looked up as many Goldhouse employees I could find. I cold DM'd every single one, got ghosted by all of them, with the exception of one individual. With the exception of one individual. And he was generous enough to give me like a 30-minute call, but he told me like, hey, we're a very lean and small team. We don't have any positions open, but I'll let you know if anything happens, right? And I was like, okay, it's like, whatever, I tried. And so I went back to, studying and all that. 2 weeks later, he asked me, I was like, say, hey, like, do you mind if we catch up? And I was like, sure, like, I'm more than happy to. And then we got on the call and he just started saying, so anyways, here's everything I'm working on. Here's the ways you could help. And he goes straight into giving me like assignments. I'm just like kind of confused. I'm like, whoa, like what's going on? And I was like, it seems like I am going to be like, part of this organization now. And so I just asked like, oh, like, what is this? And he's like, oh yeah, by the way, sorry if I just got ahead of myself. I want to be a fellow with Goldhouse. And that's like a volunteer position. And I was just so thrilled to have that. So that's like my first entry into Goldhouse, where I was a volunteer while juggling all my other like internships and school and my company. But I saw more and more how much I was prioritizing this and how much like joy it gave me. So during my last year of school, I was a fellow and a scout for Goldhouse Ventures. And I was able to really see like from the inside out what it does and how it built conviction over time for me. Like, this is where I need to be.
Right. I think that's super fascinating. What was it about the Goldhouse website that resonated for you and made you cheer up?
Yeah, I think for me, if I had to distill it down, it was the whole idea of empowerment, right? I think for me, I carry like very deep scars and chip on the shoulder about coming from, an underprivileged background and have to prove myself. And also growing up, I saw how my parents were mistreated. And a quick story here is that, while my parents were going to bankruptcy, we would have to move apartments every year because, we just had to go wherever the rental rate was the cheapest. But every time we move, the apartment managers would create some like BS claim about like, oh, there's like holes in the wall or you didn't clean it well. So they'll try to just keep the deposit, the security deposit. But we need that for the next security deposit. And it's all BS, right? I saw my mom cleaning the house thoroughly. Like we would help out too. And so in high school, I saw that happen a couple times. Or like, the landlords, they saw my parents were Asian immigrants. They didn't speak English that well. So just like, oh, they're like easy targets to keep the security deposit. I remember one time very clearly, we were moving again. And my mom spent 3 days scrubbing everything, patching up everything. And then the apartment manager came in for the inspection and he just started like yelling at my mom. He was like, what's this hole in the wall? Where are these nails? Like, it's just like, oh, we're like, what the hell? And he was just like yelling so mean.
Yeah.
And then after he left, my mom just like broke down crying.
Yeah.
And that was really the first time I felt real anger. Like I'm a chill person.
Yeah.
But like someone like yells at my mom, like talks down on us. I was like, what the heck? And I was just so pissed. I was like, okay, like no more, right? I'm in high school, but I'm gonna have to do something about this. So that weekend I went to Starbucks, opened up my laptop, downloaded all the California tenant rights and laws, and just went down reading every single point. And I was like, okay, because of this section, because of this subsection, like we have like a real claim here or like a real defense against like, unlawful seizure of the security deposit. So I wrote up a demand letter and, I also found out like, oh, who are the owners of this apartment? It's like some PE firm. And so I just put together this like, it's like in retrospect, it's so funny, but like this like high schooler just sent the email to apartment manager saying, hey, here's a demand letter, give back all our security deposits at this time where I'm going to take it to small claims court.
Right.
I'm going to escalate. I'm going to send this to the legal department of the private equity fund that owns you guys. And I just like sent it off. I was like so mad. Within 24 hours, we got a security deposit back.
Wow.
Right? And I was like, wow, like law is one, so powerful. And two, this is what happens when you stand up for yourself, right?
Right.
Instead of just taking it and just like, trying to keep harmony and peace. I think Asians need to speak up and argue for our rights and not just be passive anymore. And that happened 3 more times. So I actually had to send out the demand letter. Well, but now the precedent document, so it's a lot easier.
Template.
Template, yeah. And then so I actually have like back in LA on like I have 3 checks from 3 different apartments just pinned against a board just to show like, oh, this is a good reminder of what it means to stand up for yourself, right? And that's actually what's also inspired me to go to law school. But I think seeing that and so many other ways that the Asian community was discriminated against made me realize, oh, our generation carries almost like a duty to protect and uplift our parents, the previous generation, our generation, and the next generation. And I think empowerment became such a dear word to me because, what we need is more power. People to stand up for each other and make sure that, hey, like our community, we're not passive. We're not here because we want you to be sorry for us, but no, we are the global majority. We are leading at the frontier and at the edges of technology, culture, media, academics. We have so much power, but now it's time for us to unleash it. And so because of that, when I went to the Gold House website, I distilled everything, like all that down into just this one theme of empowerment and representation. And to me, like everything I've ever been through culminated in that moment. And it's like, where it's like, oh, Gold House is where all of me belongs.
Right. I think that's really interesting. And, what's interesting is that also the intersection between not just Gold House in terms of empowering the Asian American community, but also I think the other side, which is, venture investing. So how does that tie together?
Yeah, the venture fund came around end of 2022. It was actually an accelerator program before that. And of course, Gold House was formed even before that. So the accelerator program took a couple pre-seed companies, invested in them, and it became a very successful program. It's like the Asian YC, right? They went, the cohort, we have 120 pre-seed companies that went through it. They raised $2.5 billion in follow-on funding after. So we're like, oh, this, is really cool. It's working. And if you think about it, it's very obvious. Like Asian founders, of course, they're going to work so hard. And what I mentioned before, they're usually leaving extremely prestigious jobs. They have amazing academic pedigrees. So when they do jump in and take that bet on themselves, they're already trained. They have that conviction and they have the work ethic. And we saw that during the accelerator. So we're like, hey, why don't we formalize this into a fund? And Gold House at that point was being a cultural powerhouse. We had a network of all these amazing investors as well, celebrities and family offices. So we put together a fund at the end of 22 and started deploying out of that. It was early stage, $30 million. The thesis is that, Asian founders are just among the best in the world. And so the purpose of it was to invest and empower the next generation of Asian founders using the Gold House network and the Gold House brand.
And what is it that you see are the trends of, I don't know, we call it Asian American founders / venture investing in Asian American, shouldn't that, it's a straw man argument, be the same as investing in general,
Well, at least in the Bay, I live in San Francisco. It's like majority is Asian anyways. You look at the Midas list, you look at the investors, you look at the founders. It's probably like one of like the rare sectors where we're overrepresented, like across being founders and investors. And the counterpoint is like, if you look at any other industry, Asians are underrepresented severely at the top most executive levels. But in venture, it's the rare exception where we are just completely dominating the category. And so, I think there needed to be alignment because Gold House, our special power and our edge is like, hey, we bring the power of the Asian community behind you. And so it makes sense for us to invest in Asian founders. Right. Performance-wise, it's a stellar. Fund 1, we're the top decile. I actually think we just breached the top 5% of our vintage among our peers. And so performance has been really incredible. I think for Fund 2, our focus shifted a bit because one, I think the venture scene looks very different now than 5 years ago. And we realized, we did a rebrand for Gold House 2, and we realized, the big narrative is like, hey, first chapter of Gold House was all about getting into mainstream media, into mainstream culture. And our belief was that, hey, like we're not going to beg for a seat at the table. We're just going to build our own house. Right? And then, earlier this year, we realized we've essentially were successful at that. Asians are leading the way, sweeping the awards. We are mainstream culture. And the Grammys just like announced a new category, of Asian pop. So we are arguably in mainstream culture. But now the question is now what, right? And I think for us is like, hey, now that we are mainstream, how do we empower and share our rich culture with everyone else and be much more inclusive?
Right.
And so our edge is in media and entertainment, it's in culture. And for Fund 2, we realized like that's our special angle, right? Yeah. To be a cultural capital fund, not just an Asian fund. Yeah. And so for Fund 2, we invest thematically at the intersection of AI and creativity. And we use the Gold House network, we use the Asian network to empower the founders who are operating in this space. Not necessarily have to be Asian, but we think this is where we have the real edge.
Let's talk a little bit more about cultural capital. Like, why is it important? Because if you're a founder, okay, I want capital. Money is green. Give me the money. I'll look up and pay AI to help me with this. 100%. I'll do that. I'll hire people. And I think to some extent, people might also be looking for social capital, maybe like introductions to enterprise customers. So, and I think every VC will say, hey, we provide capital and social capital. What does cultural capital mean?
I think capital, one, any investor would say capital is commoditized. raise money, but if there's no strategic value to it, then, like, do you really want them to cap table? I think for us, like cultural capital, it means a couple things. The benefit accrues depending on where you operate. Let's say you're a consumer brand or you're a consumer tech company. It's very helpful to have a celebrity on your cap table, right?
Of course, yeah.
It's really helpful to have a network of influencers, actors, artists who are representing your brand, and the ambassadorship. Like that's like an obvious thing. But I think, more broadly, I think cultural capital means that when we invest in you, we bring you into the mainstream and we are making sure you're part of the mainstream narrative. And, I think this is important because one thing I've realized is that there's a lot of smart people and they're so focused on technology. But what is the narrative around that technology? AI came out a couple of years ago. People were fascinated by technology, but you see this big whiplash against AI now. I think if you look at the latest surveys, people have deep mistrust in AI. And depending on the industries you talk to, they feel very conflicted about it too. But here in Silicon Valley or these technology hubs, we're so blinded by like the technology advancements that we forget like culture is what creates behavior change, right? And how culture talks about your technology, about your company, is seriously impacts adoption, seriously impacts the long-term longevity of your company, makes it relevant to your buyers and so on and so forth. I think also being culturally relevant is also almost like a kingmaker effect. Right. I think in every industry, there's a couple companies that kind of dominate and it takes a mind share of the population. So for us, when we invest, we do so with a couple promises. Like one, depending on what kind of company you are, we'll get you connected to all the right people. Like Clouded, for example, we're going to try to bring as many ICP artists to them as possible within our network. And, I think they're a perfect example of like they're really leading culture. Making distribute and making mainstream. So really good fit. And also more broadly too, making sure how your company enters the mainstream is being talked about, the narrative around your technology is something we help.
Yeah. I think Clouded is an investment that we both share in our portfolios as well. So I'm just kind of curious because it's an interesting intersection of, I think, three Venn diagrams in my head, right? I think there's one that you mentioned is culture. The other part is maybe, let's call it the founder spirit, people who want to build, entrepreneurs. And then the third category is, we can call it AI and technology. I feel like there's a lot of tension in the culture today. I feel like if I was to put my finger on the pulse, I think there's a lot of suspicion or frustration, especially when AI founders say, "Hey, we're going to take away jobs. Go find a new job." By the way, do you like being an electrician for data centers? It feels, and there's a lot of backlash as well. I don't know what's going on. What do you think is happening?
I think what we see in the headlines, once again, is culture, right? It's like, oh, these big tech companies, these big companies are going to lay off employees. So we're seeing that, right? A lot of conversation around like what's the real reason, but the prevailing narrative is AI is making us all leaner. We don't need the workforce. And so unemployment becomes a big topic. I think there's a lot of paranoia for the next generation. What happens when AI makes a lot of these like entry-level jobs obsolete? What happens to college students? What happens to your future kids? No one has a good answer to that. I think at least in the creative industries, we see that is a double-edged sword. Generative AI makes any consumer become a creator. So that's empowerment there, right? But there's also arguments of like, hey, these AI models, they're trained on work that is not attributable back to original creators. And there's talks about how do you compensate the creators, right, for these models too. I think that's a big sticking point in the creative industries. I think the technology behind it is not part of the actual conversation. No one talks about harness models, or we're not talking about like the intricacies of the AI model, but really it's like on a day-to-day basis, how does this affect us, right? And that's for like the wide swath of the population. So there's definitely tension. I think there's a trust issue with the AI because now we're also seeing it used for malicious purposes. There's deepfakes, and we're also seeing the cybersecurity space too. It's scary what it could do, right? And you hear about Anthropic's model and all that. we know for a fact AI will change how we operate on a day-to-day level, and there's deep economic uncertainty over it.
Yeah. And, I'm just kind of curious that from your perspective, could you share a personal story about a time that you've been brave?
Yeah. Well, telling my mom I'm not going to be a lawyer. That was really brave.
Boy, yeah.
Well, I mean, first time I'm telling her I'm not going to be a doctor. Second time I'm not going to be a lawyer.
Oh boy.
And I'm going to join this small organization called Gold House. And she's like, what is it, like a Chinese restaurant? Like, oh, it's Gold House.
That could sound like a Chinese restaurant. Yeah.
But, no, she was like, was it nonprofit? Was like, what's venture capital?
Yeah.
Is what I'm going to tell my friends. And actually, it's just really fun. The reason why she accepted my career path, it happened only recently, was because it was because of JD Vance.
Oh yeah.
She was like, oh, like JD Vance, the vice president of the United States, was a VC before. So I guess this is like a real career.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like JD Vance is the reason why my mom's accepting my career, right? Yeah. But yeah, I think bravery to me cannot exist in its own vacuum. I think it needs to be juxtaposed by like a decision where there's some degree of fear or uncertainty involved. And I would say two things. Like one, when I did my first startup, I think there's a lot of like brave moments in the sense that like the decisions you make just really is like do or die for a company. I won't get too deep into the details. That's like hour-long conversation for another time. But I think doing that startup, long story short, it like crashed and burned. But making the right ethical decisions, like what would be the best thing to do for my team, for myself, for our stakeholders. It's very easy to take the easy way out, or it's very easy to do the things that will make you look good or like preserve your reputation. But I think bravery is like, okay, like it's inconvenient, It's if I have to wind down, I'm gonna do it properly. Maybe I'll take a hit on it. It's fine. But I think bravery is also accepting reality. It's like, hey, like this is not working out. I put like a year, my heart and soul into it, but it didn't work out.
Right.
I think that's one like example of bravery. I think the other one is I think deciding to join Gold House. Like, if you look at my LinkedIn, if you looked at my career path, it seems very shiny. But there's a lot of failures along the way. Like so many failures. Like but I think joining Gold House to me at that moment, like it felt so right. But I think the message there was like, are you willing to give up a decade-long journey of getting to like big law, right? It means giving up pleasing your parents. It means like maybe you have to deal with economic uncertainty now, right? It means like you're going against the grain, going against your expectations, and really taking a bet on yourself that even if nothing works out, you did it because this is your dream.
Right.
I think that's bravery. I think it's crazy to say joining Gold House is brave because, in social media, we have so much fun. It's an amazing place to be. But internally, it was like, could I just give up everything that I've been striving so hard for to enter like a new world?
Yeah.
And so, but best decision I've ever made, I think, is something, a decision I really struggled with. One of my mentors actually like chewed me out because he was also a JD-MBA and he basically saying like, hey, when I was telling him about my career decisions, he was like, you have to stop thinking, you guys stop thinking about optionality. As consultants, we love optionality, right? Like he just like ripped me a new one saying like, you're all about protecting the downside and keeping your options open. You're so scared to go all in and try to capture as much upside as possible and, taking a big bet on yourself. Like you will never be happy if all you're doing is minimizing and mitigating the downside. You're looking at the wrong direction. And so if you're going to go do something, go all the way in. Stop trying to dabble in law and PE and VC. Just go all in on one thing. Even it means like losing optionality. It means closing the doors, right? It means like having difficult conversations with your parents and, other friends and so on and so forth. So I think for me personally, it's just really, for me, like I think bravery was going against everything I've been taught, right? Prestige, stability, money, and just really pursuing your passions and dreams.
Right. I'm just curious because I think, we put away the shiny LinkedIn, all that stuff. How would you describe yourself?
Me?
Yeah.
I think I would describe myself as like just someone you can't kill. Right? Yeah, like I'm unkillable.
Yeah,
you know?
unkillable. There we go.
Yeah, I'm like, I succeed just purely because like I get back up it,
Yeah.
get back up again. And I love this one quote. It said, a winner is a loser who tried one more time.
Yeah.
I think I'm a loser who just tried like one more time. If you look at my LinkedIn once again, or just my job history, like for example, like Booz Allen, right? It's a consulting firm. That was like a 6-7 month process. I already got rejected twice, you know, but I just kept at it. Like rejection did not stop me. A lot of like the internships, early internships I had to do some crazy things to get them, right? Like I had to like drive down from LA to San Diego at 4 a.m. just to go to an interview because I really wanted it. Even like at a PE firm, like one of the PE firms I worked at, like I was rejected from that before, but you know, I just kept at it. Just shameless networking. I don't think I'm particularly brilliant. You know, I think for me, I'm just relentless and just being relentless in a single direction for a long time. And so, yeah, I'll just describe myself as just, I genuinely think I'm just like a loser who just doesn't know when to quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. On that note, I'd love to summarize the 3 big takeaways. First of all, thanks so much for sharing about your early educational journey.
Of course.
And it's less about education, but more about, I think, that those prisms of your parental expectations, financial reality of your family, as well as your own exploration of your own pursuits and strengths, which was, I think, really interesting to hear because I think it resonates with myself as well. And I think with so many people. Secondly, thanks for sharing about your professional journey. I thought it was just fascinating to hear about how you were able to transcend, I think, some of your prior fears, your search for optionality and status and safety to join an organization that you really care about, which is Goat House, and how I think Goat House both resonated with you as an organization, but also how you see investing as that path for you as well. Lastly, thanks so much for sharing about the broader trends, I would say, about Asian American representation, inclusion, and empowerment, as well as how that intersects with the macro trends of technology and cultural capital. I thought it was fascinating about how you're putting and assembling that all together to be something that's stronger and useful for founders who want to build a future. On that note, thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Thank you, Jeremy. It was a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.